What was it like to be a new student at the first year of Mercer Institute when it opened in 1833? Well, we kind of know what that was like. David Butler was a new student, and he kept a journal, a pretty detailed journal of his first year at Mercer, but he really focused on that first day. So let me share part of that with you. The three of us arrived around sunset, having made our journey in a one-horse wagon, which carried not only ourselves, but our baggage and our bedrolls. We had heard of old Master President Billington Sanders. We really eagerly looked forward to meeting him. Well, he came to our wagon and helped us unload our possessions. The scenes of this place was strange. The campus was in a total forest. There were trees everywhere, and with a few buildings just kind of scattered here and there. And it appeared to us that this was a field school in the middle of the woods. The next morning, an unusual sound startled us. All the inmates, including ourselves, hurried into pants and jackets and made a run for prayers. On the throne in one corner of a large room of a log cabin sat the teachers and President Sanders. After a period of profound silence, the roll call began very slowly and alphabetically. And afterwards, the Bible was read, and then old Master Sanders rose with dignity and authority to announce the work orders of the day. Afterwards, there was a great rush for breakfast. 2 long tables weighted down with all the foods, and we sat around the tables. And then old Master stood next to old Miss, his wife. He was 6 feet tall and more, and in his right hand he had a table knife which he held firmly, and that was his scepter of the dining room. And he gave a number of rapid blows on the table and said grace. We then resumed our studies until 10 a.m. before going out by squads to do manual labor. And at the command of a squad leader, we cleared the land of trees, trunks, roots, and helped prepare the land for planting. We worked until 1 p.m., had lunch, then studied until supper time. After a half-hour break, we resumed our studies until 9 p.m. when the candles were put out. It's a very different experience than most Mercer students have today. Faculty members were very different there too. Not only did they help the student with their studies and give the academics, but the faculty were right there in the fields working alongside the students, and the faculty was in charge of all discipline. And the tuition was $15 per term. And then for living in the loft of a faculty member and having your clothes washed and your bed linens washed, it was $20, or a little less than $20 per term. When you look across the field here, you will see kind of some dilapidated storefronts. That was the first Mercer Village, but it was called Penfield Village back then. There were some little stores, there were some little places for them to get some food, and that's where the students went to hang out a lot. There were no women really here except for the daughters and the wives of faculty, and so the guys mostly just played marbles. The Greek societies that we know today actually began on this campus in the first year of 1833. The first society was the Franklin Society, and it composed of students that were interested in debating. And the Franklin Society only lasted 1 year because there was such a demand for the students who couldn't get in that they wanted to participate. So they dissolved the Franklin Society and developed 2 other societies. the Phi Delta Society for Debate and the Ciceronian Society. And they eventually built their own houses. If you're looking at the chapel now, their houses were in front of the chapel on each side, so you would have the Phi Delta house and the Ciceronian house.
The Penfield Chapel was built by David Demarest and completed in 1846 at a cost of $6,794. It was used very frequently in the early years of the university as students attended mandatory chapel services. It was also used for meetings of the Board of Trustees, debates of the Ciceronian and Phi Delta literary societies, and Penfield Baptist Church. The Jesse Mercer Memorial Tablet hanging over the rostrum was put in place in 1848. And after Mercer moved to Macon in 1871, the university gave the chapel to Penfield Baptist Church, and the congregation took immediate occupancy. During the 1970s, the Penfield congregation could no longer support the upkeep of the chapel, and it was returned to the university. After a renaissance of appreciation for heritage, Mercer completely restored it to its original condition and gave it back to the Penfield Baptist Church.
When the university decided to move to Macon in 1871, the buildings and grounds were given to the community, except for these 4 acres of land that was to serve as the community cemetery. The cemetery, officially named Penfield Cemetery of Mercer University, serves as a burying ground for the longtime residents of Penfield and Mercerians who, because of their service to the institution, might properly be buried here. Only a longtime resident of Penfield or a longtime employee of Mercer University may be buried in the cemetery. I want us to focus on some of the people buried here who are a part of Mercer. It all began with Jesse Mercer. He was born in North Carolina in 1769, the eldest of a family of 8 children. At age 19, Jesse married his first wife, Sabrina. Not uncommon in those days, Jesse was never formally educated. While perhaps he was never regarded as an educator, he was a highly respected and influential minister who valued education. He served his first church as pastor for over 20 years. He was not only an accomplished minister, but he became a publisher. According to biographers, there was a great lack of satisfactory hymn books for churches in those days, so Jesse compiled a book which he called Mercer Cluster. The statue of Jesse Mercer on campus is holding a copy of the cluster. Jesse's wife Sabrina passed away in 1876 after almost 50 years of marriage. In 1877, Jesse married a second time to a widow named Nancy Simons. Her first husband was a wealthy tavern owner. It was the inherited wealth of Jesse Mercer's second wife that allowed him to contribute close to the sum of $40,000 to Mercer. With all that Jesse Mercer had done to support the concept of a Baptist school for men, the school was named in his honor. He was never president, but served as the first chairman of the Board of Trustees. His second wife passed away in 1841, and he died 4 months later at the age of 71. Other notable Mercerians buried here include Billington Sanders. He was the first president of Mercer University. His wife, Cynthia Holliday Sanders, known to all as Old Miss, assisted in establishing the Christian character of the school by serving as a surrogate mother to students. 26 of the 39 original students lived in the Sanders home. That home still stands today on the edge of the Penfield campus. He served as president from 1833 to 1840. Sprite Dowell served as the university's president for 20 years from 1928 to 1953. Dowell was responsible for the construction of Mary Aaron Porter Hall, the university's first female residence hall. He also authored a history of Mercer University. George Connell was the university's 21st president, serving from 1953 to 1959. The Student Center on campus bears his name. He was also responsible for the construction of several academic buildings and a significant increase in the university's endowment fund. James McAfee is the most recent Mercer leader to be buried at Penfield in 2004. He was not an educator, but a highly successful entrepreneur whose wealth was a result of his leadership in the healthcare management industry. Combined with his generosity, led to the establishment of the McAfee School of Theology in 1994, which is located on the Atlanta campus.
Located directly behind the cemetery that houses many of Mercer's first presidents and staff and teachers is a graveyard dedicated solely to the enslaved populations and Black populations of Penfield. Mercer Institute was founded on the donations of 26 original donors, 20 of whom were slaveholders. In addition to the farm and domestic duties, Mercer also used enslaved labor to construct many of its first buildings.
It is important for Mercer to recognize and actively reconcile the school's beginning and its reliance on enslaved men and women to run Penfield. However, the story does not end there. Mercer University would go on to play an important role in the desegregation of Georgia's higher education institutions. On January 6, 1961, U.S. District Judge William A. Boodle, a Mercer graduate, trustee, and former dean of the Mercer Law School, ordered the University of Georgia to admit Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter, thereby ending 160 years of segregation at the institution. Roughly 2 years later, Mercer voluntarily integrates on April 18, 1963, under the leadership of Mercer President Rufus Harris. Admission to qualified students were granted based upon race, color of skin, creed, and origin, and was declared official by the University Board of Trustees. Sam Jerry Oni of Ghana became the first Black student admitted to the university. Nearly 60 years later, Mercer has one of the diverse student bodies in the state of Georgia.
Now, the move to Macon occurred after the Civil War. Mercer was having a hard time recruiting students to bring it back up to the level that it was before the war, and so they realized that they needed to find another location that wasn't so isolated, one that would be attractive to potential students. Macon popped up and not only donated land, but over $30,000 in incentive monies, which back in the 1870s was a lot of money after the Civil War. And so that is what tipped the scales for Mercer moving to Macon. And they made that move in 1871.